The poem is set in ballad form with rhymes of A-B. It's called The Table's Turn because one thinks that books are the key to intelligence, which is what his friend is thinking as Wordsworth calls him out in the book, and to learning everything one knows. But Wordsworth thinks otherwise as to why nature and things around can help you learn just as much as a book can.
This poem is different from other poems because not only does it talk about nature, but it stands up for and fights for the idea of being outdoors rather than indoors.
One political/historical context that may have influenced this poem is the Industrial Revolution. The Industrial Revolution started in England in the 1760s, and it lasted until the 1850s. The Industrial Revolution is basically a time in history where human workers were replaced by machines and the production of goods increased to a larger scale. This movement eliminated many small businesses in England and replaced them with large factories. Because of the drastic change in the way products were made, the agricultural economy was soon replaced with an industrial economy. This caused the world to become a lot more industrialized, as the title of the movement suggests, and people began to step away from the outdoors and into factories. I think Wordsworth was very angered by this, as shown through his writing of The Table's Turn. This poem was published in 1798, which was right smack in the middle of the Industrial Revolution. In fact, Wordsworth seemed to mention the Industrial Revolution a few times in his poem. In the last two stanzas, he says, "Our meddling intellect misshapes the beauteous form of things we murder to dissect, enough of science and art." The line, "Our meddling intellect misshapes the beauteous form of things," conveys Wordsworth's belief that our newfound knowledge of machines has caused us to ruin nature by building factories and polluting the world. And the line, "We murder to dissect, enough of science and art," shows that Wordsworth feels that humans are too involved in discovering new things that we don't realize that we are killing nature. And in the very last line mentioned shows that Wordsworth despises the Industrial Revolution and that he wishes we could go back to nature. There is one cultural movement that seemed to be very influential in the making of this poem, and that is the Romanticism movement. The movement began with the publication of lyrical ballads by William Wordsworth and Samuel Taylor Coleridge in the 1790s. The Romanticism movement emerged in response to the Enlightenment and Neoclassicism movement, both of which emphasized reason, order, rationality, and intellect above everything. Romanticism was the exact opposite of these two movements, as it put emphasis on irrationality, imagination, transcendentalism, and emotion. This movement was characterized partly by a deepened appreciation of nature and an exaltation of emotion over reason and of senses over intellect. As mentioned before, William Wordsworth was a big contributor to the creation of the Romanticism movement. He co-wrote a bunch of poems called lyrical ballads, with The Table's Turn being one of the few poems published in the book. One can easily see how the creation of Romanticism influenced this poem. The poem deals with two friends arguing, one, the poet, trying to convince the other, his friend, to stop reading books and become one with nature. I think that in this situation, the poet is meant to represent the Romanticism movement, and his friend is meant to represent the Enlightenment or Neoclassicism movement. Both of these movements were sort of at war at the time of the poem's publication, much like the poet and his friend in the poem. So it seems only fitting that Wordsworth would incorporate these two movements into his poem.
Religious context did not have much play in the influence of this poem. The author just believes that being engulfed in nature is good for the heart and soul. Our bibliography consists of 6 different sources. This top source here and this source starts with Romanticism, gave us our political and cultural context. The second one, the third one, and then the second to last one, those were more of the themes and the summaries to help us better understand the poem. And then our last source is the poem itself.